Rain dragged itself down the law firm windows in long gray smears, as if the city were trying to erase its own reflection and failing. Inside the conference room at Whitmore and Associates, the air felt recycled and too cold. The kind of chill that seeped into knuckles and made every surface seem harder than it looked. Vespers sat in a leather chair that swallowed her frame. The chair was expensive, but it held her like a trap. Her trench coat had dried stiff at the shoulders from the walk-in, and the fabric pinched when she breathed. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers locked tight enough to blanch at the joints. She kept her eyes on the table because the table was honest. The table did not smirk. James Preston did. He lounged at the head of the mahogany like it belonged to him the way oxygen belonged to lungs. His suit was dark, perfect, and loud in its perfection. A watch flashed on his wrist every time he moved, a small, sharp glint that kept demanding attention. He checked it again, then again, as if time were a servant he could snap at. Next to him, Gregson shuffled documents with clipped precision, paper sliding against paper in harsh, impatient whispers. He had the kind of face that was born to say the word reasonable while doing something cruel. "Let us review the terms one final time," Gregson said, voice softened to the point of insult. He aligned the pages in a neat stack and nudged them forward. The motion exact, practiced, rehearsed. Vesper's gaze dropped to the header. Dissolution, waiver, clean break. The words were black and clean and indifferent, as if they had never touched a living person. Mr. Preston retains the Mercer Island property, the primary residence, and full ownership of Preston Dynamics. Gregson continued. As per the prenuptial agreement, you are entitled to a lump sum of $50,000. In exchange, you waive all rights to future support and any claims on Mr. Preston's future earnings. The pen appeared between them, sliding across the polished wood. It rolled once, twice, then stopped with its point angled toward her, as if even the ink had been instructed where to aim. James leaned forward, elbows near the paperwork, smile smooth as spilled oil. "It is a clean break, Viv," he said. "Clean means no drama, no tears, no scenes, just a signature." The word Viv landed like an old hand on the back of her neck. Familiar, possessive, wrong. Vesper did not look up. She stared at the line where her name would go. She could hear the building's ventilation hum, steady and indifferent. She could smell James's cologne, expensive and sharp, like something designed to cut through crowded rooms. It clung to the air as if it had legal rights, too. "Sign it," James said, voice lowering. "Do not make this messy. You have nowhere else to go." Gregson's dictaphone sat near his hand like an extra witness. His finger hovered above it, waiting for the moment her voice cracked. Vesper's throat tightened, not with tears, but with the pressure of holding her face still. The room wanted her to perform. It wanted her to beg, to plead, to bargain for dignity using money as the currency. The room wanted her humiliation to be audible. James gave the pen a small tap, a tiny sound against the table that felt louder than it should have. 50,000 will at least get you something," he said. "An apartment, somewhere cheaper. Tacoma, maybe." He chuckled. The sound was wet and careless. Vesper reached for the pen. Her hand did not tremble. For a moment, James's smile faltered, as if he had expected her skin to split open and spill emotion. He recovered quickly, because arrogance was a habit he wore better than the suit. Gregson clicked the dictaphone on. The device made a soft, decisive sound, like a lock engaging. "Is there anything you wish to say on the record, Mrs. Preston?" he asked, already tasting the plea he expected. Vesper lifted her eyes. Her irises were green, sharp, and unnervingly calm. There was no shine of panic, no watery surrender. Her expression was flat, as if the part of her that used to flinch had quietly stepped out of the room. "No," she said. One word. Clean. Surgical. She lowered the pen to the paper. The nib scratched across the page, a thin, steady rasp that filled the silence like a blade being honed. She wrote her name with deliberate care. Vesper Caldwell, not Preston. The last letter settled on the page, and the room seemed to inhale without meaning to. She slid the documents back across the table. "Done," she said. James snatched them up, eyes scanning her signature as if he could catch a trick in the ink. He barked a short laugh that tried to sound victorious. "That was easier than I thought." He stood, buttoning his jacket, already shifting into the posture of a man who believed he had just escaped consequence. "You are making the right choice, Viv," he said. "You were never cut out for this world. The press, the pressure. You are simple. You will be happier being simple again." He flicked a check onto the table without looking, like tossing a receipt. $50,000. The paper skidded, then stopped near her elbow. "Take care of yourself," he said, already turning away. Vesper rose. She did not touch the check. James paused at the door, annoyed by the fact that she was still occupying air. "What?" he said. "If you want it, pick it up." "I do not want the money," Vesper said. Her voice had changed, not louder, not sharper, just steadier, as if something inside her had finally found its spine. "Keep it," she added. "You are going to need it more than I will." James laughed, disbelief loud enough to draw attention from the hallway beyond the glass. "I am worth 40 million, Vesper. I think I will be fine." She looked at him the way people looked at a stranger who had stepped too close on a train platform. "Goodbye, James," she said. Then she walked past him. The receptionist outside glanced up with pity ready on her face, but Vesper's gaze never snagged on it. The carpet muffled her steps. The lights above buzzed faintly. The glass doors opened with a soft hiss, and the elevator waited like a clean, quiet mouth. When the doors slid shut, James's reflection vanished from her world in a seam of mirrored steel. Inside the elevator, the silence was complete. No cologne, no laughter, no paper shuffling, just the soft, mechanical descent and the faint tremor in her fingers that she refused to let become weakness. At the lobby, the doors opened. Rain sound rushed in like applause. If justice stories are your thing, hit subscribe. We dive in now. Vesper stepped outside without opening an umbrella, letting the cold water find the back of her neck. She did not look back. The rain met her face like a cold verdict the moment she stepped out. But she didn't flinch. It threaded through her hair, sank into her collar, and pressed the trench coat to her shoulders until it felt heavier than fabric had any right to feel. The streetlights turned every puddle into liquid brass. Tires hissed by, throwing up thin fans of dirty water that never quite reached the curb. She walked without hailing a cab. 3 blocks, then another half. Her shoes clicked once, then dulled as the sidewalks turned slick and grit-coated. A bus shelter waited ahead, glass fogged from bodies that had leaned against it and moved on. The bench was metal and unforgiving, cold enough to sting through the seams of her coat when she sat. The city kept moving around her, as if nothing had happened. A couple passed, heads down under a shared umbrella. A man in a hoodie shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. Someone laughed too loudly from across the street, the sound rising and falling like it had somewhere better to be. Vesper let the noise wash past. Her fingers found the phone in her pocket. It was older, its screen webbed with a crack that split the light into jagged lines. She didn't unlock it. She didn't scroll. She typed the number from memory, each digit placed with the same steadiness she'd used on the signature line upstairs. The call rang once, twice, Her breath made a small cloud in the air as she spoke. Protocol 7. There was a pause so clean it felt measured. Then a voice came through, low and textured, like gravel under velvet. Verification code. Vesper's gaze stayed on the street. A car splashed through a puddle, the water breaking into white spray. Somewhere, a crosswalk signal clicked into its countdown. Orion. Black. Zenith. Silence. Another pause. Shorter this time. Location. 3rd and Pike. Seattle. Vesper said. I am alone. 4 minutes. Miss Caldwell, do not move. The line went dead. No goodbyes. No questions. No warmth. Just a decision made and executed. Vesper lowered the phone and stared at it for half a beat, as if checking whether it would try to argue with her. Then she stood, crossed 2 steps to the trash can beside the bench, and dropped the phone in. It landed with a soft plastic thud against old wrappers and rain-damp paper. She sat back down. The rain thickened. It drummed on the shelter roof in uneven bursts, a nervous rhythm that matched nothing in the street. Her wet sleeves clung to her wrists, a strand of hair stuck to her cheek, and she didn't bother to move it. Cars passed. Toyotas. Fords. A Tesla gliding too quietly. Then the traffic shifted. Not with sirens, not with horns, just a subtle parting, like a school of fish reacting to something larger moving underneath. Headlights emerged around the corner. Low, white, controlled. A long body followed. Midnight blue so dark it was almost black. The paint swallowing the streetlight instead of reflecting it. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, extended wheelbase, moved through the rain without splashing. The wheels cut the water like it was permission. It stopped exactly at the curb in front of the bus shelter. No plate, no city sticker, just a small crest on the bumper that did not belong to any dealership. The engine idled so softly the rain almost drowned it. The rear door opened before the car fully settled. A man stepped out holding a black umbrella. He was tall and spare, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like it had been built into him. His hair was silver, neat, and his posture had the rigid calm of someone trained to stand in storms without acknowledging them. He walked straight to her, as if the entire city had been cleared for this path. "Miss Caldwell," he said, dipping his head barely a bow, but unmistakably respectful. "We have been waiting." His voice was controlled, but the word waiting carried weight, like a promise kept over years. Vesper rose. Rain slid from the ends of her hair and down her jaw. She stepped under the umbrella's shadow, and the sound changed immediately. The downpour became muffled, distant, like a crowd behind thick doors. "I know, Arthur," she said. A flicker moved across his eyes, not surprise, not emotion. Something closer to relief. "Mr. Roth never doubted you would make the call. He merely feared the timing." The phrase "Mr. Roth" landed like a key turning in a lock. Arthur guided her to the open door. The interior smelled like aged leather and polished wood, and something that wasn't a scent so much as an absence. Silence engineered into a luxury product. The seat received her with warmth that felt out of place after the bench. When the door closed, the city's noise vanished, as if it had been cut. Outside, rain streaked across the tinted glass. Faces on the sidewalk turned toward the car, curious, then quickly looked away, instinctively understanding they weren't meant to witness this. Arthur slid into the driver's seat. The divider between them stayed up. He did not ask if she was comfortable. The car moved, not fast, not reckless. It flowed. On the console between the rear seats sat a crystal tumbler filled with water and a single envelope. Thick, cream-colored paper, heavy enough to feel expensive from across the seat. It was sealed with red wax. A crest was pressed into it, a phoenix rising from a burning tower. Vesper's fingers hovered over the seal for a moment. The wax looked too perfect to break. The kind of perfect that dared someone to ruin it. She tore it anyway. The wax gave with a muted crack. Inside was a keycard black titanium, cool against her skin, and a handwritten note on thick paper, the ink dark and unhurried. The cage is open. The wings are yours. Meet me at the hangar. A. R. The letters were confident. No flourish. No explanation. Arthur's voice came through the quiet from the front, measured. "Where to, ma'am?" "King County International," Vesper said. Arthur acknowledged with a small nod, visible only in the rearview mirror. His hands remained steady on the wheel, gloved in dark leather. "The private terminal." "Clay Lacey Aviation," he began. "No." The single word cut cleanly through the car's hush. Vesper's gaze stayed on the keycard. Its surface swallowed light like the phantom's paint. "The South Hangar," she said. "The one that doesn't exist on the maps." Arthur's eyes widened slightly in the mirror. A crack in his composure. "Repaired almost immediately." "Understood, ma'am." The phantom surged forward. The city blurred into a wash of gray and neon. Water streamed off the hood in clean sheets. The wipers moved with perfect, silent timing, clearing the world into brief moments of clarity before the rain reclaimed it. Vesper leaned back, letting the seat cradle her spine. The warmth in the car coaxed feeling back into her fingers. She watched the phoenix crest on the torn seal fragment resting on her palm, red wax staining the side of her thumb like a small wound. The tumbler of water trembled slightly as the car merged onto the highway, then settled. Through the window, the freeway signs flashed past, green and white, pointing toward exits she had never taken for herself. Headlights smeared into bright lines in the rain. The city behind them became a dim, receding glow. Vesper slid the black keycard into her coat pocket and closed her hand over it, feeling its hard edge press into her palm. The pressure was real. The silence around her was real. And somewhere ahead, beyond the gray, a door was already unlocked. The phantom left the highway and slipped onto a frontage road that looked too plain to deserve its own exit. The rain thickened here, heavier, louder, as if the sky had found a reason to punish this stretch of asphalt. Industrial fencing rose on both sides, topped with razor wire that glistened under floodlights. Cameras tracked the car's approach with mechanical patience, lenses turning in small, precise movements. Arthur didn't slow. He didn't lower a window. He simply drove toward a gate that should have demanded credentials. A scanner swept the phantom from bumper to trunk. A soft electronic chirp cut through the rain. The steel gates rolled open. The sound wasn't dramatic. It was worse, quiet, obedient. The kind of sound that said the decision had been made long before the car arrived. The phantom glided onto the tarmac. Floodlights carved the darkness into hard white shapes. Puddles like shattered mirrors. Painted lines on wet concrete. The hulking outline of a hangar that looked like a warehouse until the details betrayed it. Motion sensors blinked. A distant generator hummed. The air smelled of jet fuel and cold metal, sharp enough to bite. Vesper watched the hangar doors without moving. Her fingers stayed closed around the edge of the black keycard in her pocket, feeling the chill of it through the fabric, as if it could anchor her to something solid. The hangar doors were already open. Inside, the aircraft waited like a predator at rest. A Bombardier Global 7500, customized, matte gunmetal, its skin swallowing light the way the Phantom had. The engines were idling, spooling in a high, thin whine that vibrated in Vesper's ribs. The stairs were lowered, lit from beneath, so each step glowed pale against the rain. Arthur stopped in front of the stairs, precisely aligned, as if parking in the wrong spot could trigger consequences. He stepped out and came around with an umbrella, but Vesper opened her door before he reached it. Rain hit her face again. She didn't flinch. Her shoes met the tarmac with a wet slap. Wind tugged at her coat, tried to pull it open, tried to make her look small. The floodlights caught the water on her hair, turned each strand into a dark thread. A flight attendant waited at the base of the stairs, perfect posture, perfect smile, eyes trained to reveal nothing. But Vesper's focus went higher. At the top of the stairs, under the overhang of the fuselage, a man leaned against the railing. Black turtleneck, dark trousers, no umbrella. Rain didn't touch him there, but the cold did, and he wore it like he owned it. He was in his early 50s, maybe, with salt and pepper hair, and a face that looked carved rather than born. His gaze locked onto Vesper with the calm of someone who had already counted every outcome. Alexander Roth, a name that moved through boardrooms like a rumor. A man who hadn't been seen in public for a decade, not in any photo that could hold up under scrutiny. The absence had made him larger, not smaller. He pushed off the railing and started down the stairs, unhurried. Each step landed with quiet certainty, a rhythm that matched the engine whine behind him. He stopped halfway, close enough that Vesper could see the faint line near his brow, the kind of scar time gives to people who have survived something expensive. "You look terrible," he said. His voice was deep, steady, no softness, no apology. "Hello to you too, Alex," Vesper replied. A small smile touched her mouth and vanished, like something she refused to spend too much energy on. "I told you not to marry him," Roth said, eyes scanning her wet coat, the tired seams, the water clinging to her lashes. "You did," Vesper said, "and I didn't listen." A gust of wind pushed Rain sideways. It struck the fuselage and broke into mist. For a moment, the whole world felt like it was made of cold spray and white light. Roth's gaze held hers, sharp and assessing. "Is it done?" he asked. "Signed and sealed," Vesper said. "Legally severed." "Good," Roth said, a cold edge entering the word. "Then he has no claim on what comes next." His hand lifted toward her face, hesitated for a fraction, an almost touch, and then he tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was small, controlled. It landed anyway, electric and intimate in the open air of a guarded tarmac. Arthur stood a step behind Vesper, umbrella angled, face blank, as if he were part of the aircraft's security system. Roth offered his arm. "Come," he said. "You need to change." Vesper took it. His sleeve was warm under her fingers, not soft, warm in the way stone warms after sitting near fire. They climbed. Each step up the stairs felt like crossing a boundary. The rain was louder below, the wind meaner, as if the world wanted to remind her what she was leaving. At the top, the jet's doorway yawned open, and air-conditioned silence spilled out like a promise. Before Vesper crossed the threshold, she paused just long enough to look out at the tarmac. Floodlights, rain, security cameras rotating in their arcs, a hangar with no signage, a gate that obeyed without being asked, the kind of place that didn't exist until it needed to. A movement in the far dark snagged the edge of the light. Not a person in uniform, not a worker. Something lower near the perimeter fence line, where the fencing met a strip of shadow. A lens glinted, a long telephoto barrel, half hidden behind wet chain link and weeds pressed flat by the downpour. The photographer didn't move much, just enough to track, just enough to breathe. The shutter clicked, once. Then again, faster staccato snaps, swallowed by the rain, but not by the camera's memory. A tiny red indicator light blinked beneath the hood of the lens. The man adjusted, fingers quick, practiced. He wasn't supposed to be there, but he was exactly where he needed to be. Jackpot had its own instincts. Vesper didn't react. Not with her face, not with her posture, but something in her chest tightened, a small muscle bracing for impact. Roth's hand rested lightly at the small of her back, guiding her forward with a touch that looked casual and meant ownership. The photographer snapped more shots, grainy, distant, imperfect, undeniable. Vesper stepped into the jet. The door hissed as it started to close, sealing out the rain and the world with it. The sound was smooth, expensive like a vault deciding to shut. Inside, the cabin smelled of leather, clean linen, and a faint trace of ozone from electronics running quietly. Lights were low, warm, designed to calm. The engine whine became a contained vibration under the floor. Steady and controlled. Roth walked beside her as if he had always belonged there. The flight attendant's smile widened a fraction, then reset. Behind the closing door, outside in the storm, the photographer checked his preview screen under his jacket. The image was blurred by rain and distance, but the shapes were unmistakable. Vesper's profile lit by floodlight, Roth's hand at her back, the global 7,500 looming like a verdict. His thumb hovered over the upload button. He pressed it. A small on-screen circle spun as the signal fought through weather and distance. Then, the upload completed. Somewhere, the internet began to tilt. On the runway, the jet started to taxi. Tires rolled over wet concrete with a deep, controlled hiss. Cabin lights remained steady. Seatbelts clicked. A soft chime sounded, polite and authoritative. Vesper stood near the window for a moment, watching the tarmac glide past. The rain smeared the glass into moving streaks of silver. Her hand went to her pocket. Her fingers found a ring, simple gold, worn smooth by years. She pulled it out and held it between thumb and forefinger. The metal was warm from her skin. Too familiar. Roth glanced at it. Expression unreadable. Vesper's eyes stayed on the runway lights, bright and straight, vanishing into darkness. The jet turned, aligning with the center line. Engines deepened. A rising growl that vibrated through bone. Vesper opened the small window vent, just enough to let a slice of cold air cut into the cabin. Wind roared softly through the crack, impatient. She flicked her thumb. The ring slipped from her fingers and disappeared into the rain dark below, swallowed by speed and water and distance. Drive faster had been a sentence. This was action. The global 7,500 accelerated, the world outside smearing into light and rain and motion, and somewhere in a penthouse miles away, a phone that hadn't started screaming yet was already doomed to. Morning hit the penthouse like a punishment. Sunlight knifed through sheer curtains and bounced off glass and chrome, too bright for the stale air that clung to the room. The scent of last night lingered, champagne gone sour, truffle oil turning heavy, perfume sweetened into something sticky. An ice bucket sat on its side near the couch, water pooling into a slow, quiet spread across marble. James Preston lay sprawled in a bed that felt suddenly too large. His mouth tasted like metal and sugar. His skull throbbed in time with a distant HVAC rattle. Somewhere in the suite, a phone buzzed, stopped, buzzed again. He blinked hard and reached for his own. The screen lit up like an accusation. Missed calls stacked in a column that seemed to keep growing as he stared. 47. 20 from Diana. 12 from Gregson. 5 from the board chair. Names he usually controlled with a single text now looked like warning labels. A knot tightened in his stomach before his brain fully caught up. He swung his legs off the bed. The carpet was thick, but the chill from the floor still climbed into his feet. He swiped open the call log and pressed Diana's name with a thumb that wasn't as steady as he wanted it to be. She answered on the first ring. "James." Finally. "Do not go outside," she snapped. "Do not post. Do not speak." Her voice came through sharp and thin, like a wire pulled too tight. "Diana, slow down," James said, rubbing his eyes until the light smeared. "I woke up minutes ago. You do not understand," she said. "You cannot be seen right now." James sat up straighter, irritation pushing through the hangover haze. "Did the stock drop? The stock is the least of your problems. Click the link I sent. Now." A soft rustle came from the other side of the bed. Lydia shifted under the sheets, making a small, sleepy sound. Her hair a messy halo against the pillow. One painted nail tapped the mattress as if she were searching for her phone in her sleep. James put Diana on speaker and opened his messages. A link sat there, glowing blue against white. He tapped it. The page loaded with a stutter, then snapped into place. Red headline, aggressive font, too many ads, too many faces in the margins. His own face, smiling, cropped too tight. The billion-dollar upgrade. His jaw tightened. Below it, a shaky video thumbnail froze on an image that didn't belong in his world. Rain, floodlights, and the unmistakable silhouette of a private jet. James's thumb hovered for half a beat, then pressed play. The audio came first. Wind, rain, a distant mechanical whine. The camera shook, struggling to focus through a chain-link fence. Then the figures sharpened into something his brain refused to accept. A woman climbing a set of aircraft stairs. Not the small, silent presence from the conference room. Not the beige coat and the lowered eyes. This woman moved with a controlled pace, her posture clean and upright, as if she'd been wearing it like armor for years. Floodlights caught the line of her cheek, the dark sweep of her hair, the way she didn't hurry. And at the top of the stairs, waiting, a man leaned in shadow. The camera zoomed too fast, pixelated, grainy. Then the face aligned with memory, and every article James had ever skimmed. Alexander Roth. James felt his blood go cold in one sudden drop, as if his body had decided to conserve itself for impact. "Roth," James whispered. "Yes," Diana said, voice lowering into something almost deadly. "That is Alexander Roth, and he just picked up your ex-wife in a global 7,500. James stared at the screen as the clip looped. Rain, stairs, that hand at the small of her back, the plane door swallowing them. "It is fake," James said, even as his throat tightened. "It has to be fake." "It is not fake," Diana cut in. "It is everywhere. Trending #1. His finger jerked the page downward. Comments rolled by like a crowd gathering for a public hanging. He fumbled the bag. "Ghost Billionaire is back." "Short Preston." "Silent Queen." James's stomach twisted, heat rising up his neck. "They are mocking me." "Perception is reality," Diana said. "Yesterday you looked like a winner. Today you look like a fool." James clenched the phone so hard the edges bit into his palm. "This is a tabloid. It does not matter." "It matters," Diana said, each word clipped. "Your board reads tabloids. Investors read tabloids. Regulators read tabloids. And they all read the same headline." Lydia stirred again, stronger this time. Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, nails clicking against glass. "Daddy, why are you shouting?" she mumbled. James didn't look at her. His attention stayed on the video, on the hand, on the plane. His brain tried to map it into a story that let him stay superior. A stunt, a rental, a desperate move. Lydia unlocked her screen and squinted. "Babe." Why are people tagging me with a grandpa? James snatched the phone from her hand so fast, her fingers jerked back. Not now. Lydia. Hey, she snapped, suddenly awake, voice sharp with entitlement. That is my phone. James tossed it onto the bed without looking. It bounced once and landed face down with a dull thud. Diana's voice filled the room again, relentless. Preston Dynamics is down in pre-market, 4%. James stood and paced, bare feet sinking into carpet that suddenly felt like it was trying to swallow him. He dragged a hand through his hair, leaving it worse. Fix it, he said. Put out a statement. No, Diana said, immediately. James stopped. His eyes narrowed. What do you mean, no? You do not accuse Roth of anything, Diana said. You do not imply he is taking advantage. You do not go to war with a man who can buy your law firm. James's jaw worked. He wanted to throw something. He wanted a lever to pull that made the world behave again. Then what? He hissed. Silence, Diana said. You go to Paris. You show up. You smile. You act unbothered. James laughed once, a short sound with no humor. Paris. Yes, Diana said. The European expansion. Your board meeting? You stay on script. James looked toward the window. The Seattle skyline stood clean and gleaming in sunlight, pretending it had never rained. Glass towers reflected blue sky, like nothing ugly had ever happened inside them. Somewhere up there, beyond the view, a jet was already cutting through cloud. His fingers tightened into a fist without him noticing. She signed the waiver, James said, voice low, as if speaking it might make it real. She has no power. Diana paused, and when she spoke again, her tone was colder. James, you need to stop saying that out loud. James's breath came shallow. He could feel his heartbeat in his fingertips. Get to the airport, Diana said, and try not to look rattled. The call ended with a hard click. Silence rushed in, thick and oppressive. Lydia sat up fully now, hair messy, mascara smudged at the corners. She pointed toward the discarded phone. Are we still going shopping in Paris today? James stared at her like she'd spoken in another language. He turned away and walked to the bar. A half-empty bottle of Dom sat beside two glasses. He poured without measuring. The champagne fizzed weakly, tired bubbles collapsing on themselves. He drank. The cold liquid hit his tongue and turned bitter instantly. Outside, the city gleamed. Inside, James's hands shook around crystal. He set the glass down too hard, and the base clicked against the counter like a warning shot. Paris, he muttered to himself, straightening his shoulders as if posture could patch the cracks. I will be fine, but the video kept playing in his head. Looping in grainy rain, the stairs, the hand, the door closing like a vault. Paris glowed like it had been polished for an audience. Streetlights turned the wet cobblestones into scattered gold, and the river carried the city's reflections in long, trembling ribbons. A black Mercedes convoy slid through traffic with the calm entitlement of money, tires whispering over stone. Ahead, the glass pyramid of the Louvre cut into the night like a blade of ice, bright and geometric against the dark sky. James Preston stepped out first. Cameras reacted instantly, shutters popping in a rapid, hungry stutter, flashes hitting his tuxedo lapels in hard white bursts. He held his smile in place as if it were part of the outfit, a practiced curve that showed teeth but never softened his eyes. The cold air smelled faintly of perfume, champagne, and rain trapped in wool coats. James, over here. Is it true about your ex-wife? Roth, did Roth pick her up? He didn't answer. He didn't even glance toward the questions that mattered. He lifted a hand like a king, acknowledging a crowd that couldn't touch him. Lydia hopped out after him, and the flashbulbs changed tone, less reverent, more curious. Her dress was bright pink sequins, loud under the lights, too short for the black tie gravity of the event. She smiled wide, chewing gum like it was part of the pose. "Smile, babe," she chirped, holding her phone up for a selfie. The screen lit her face in bluish light. James leaned in just enough for the cameras to catch them together, his jaw tightening as her phone hovered between them like a third guest he hadn't invited. "Put the phone away," he said through his smile. Lydia's eyes flicked up, still glossy with excitement. "But they love us. They love money," James murmured. "Try not to look." Cheap. Her smile faltered, then returned sharper. She snapped another selfie anyway, the shutter sound tiny and annoying under the roar of professional cameras. A velvet rope parted. Security nodded. The gala swallowed them. Inside the Louvre, the main hall had been transformed into something that didn't feel like a museum anymore. Chandeliers hung like constellations, dripping light over marble floors. Champagne flutes chimed as people moved, their laughter controlled and careful, as if even joy had to be curated. The air carried a layered scent: flowers, citrus, expensive cologne, and the faint mineral cold of stone. James scanned the room like a general. He spotted the cluster he wanted. Henri Delacroix, white mustache, expression carved into permanent boredom, surrounded by bankers with polished smiles and eyes that weighed everything. James adjusted his cufflink. He set his shoulders. "Henry," he called, voice loud enough to cut through the orchestra's soft strings. Henri turned slowly. His gaze dropped to James's tuxedo, then slid to Lydia's sequin pink like it was a stain on the carpet. "Mr. Preston," Henri said, and the greeting landed without warmth. "Henri," James replied, extending his hand. "It's good to see you. I trust we're still aligned for tomorrow." Henri accepted the handshake with the enthusiasm of a man signing a parking ticket. "We were surprised to see you still attending," Henri said, eyes steady. "Given the news." James laughed lightly, as if the word news referred to weather. "Tabloid noise. You know the press. My ex-wife is having a difficult time." Lydia leaned closer to James, whispering too loudly. "He's French. Do I kiss him?" James's fingers tightened around his champagne flute. Glass squeaked faintly under his grip. Henri's gaze did not shift to Lydia. It stayed on James with a slow, quiet judgment. "Indeed," Henri said, "though she does not look as if she is suffering tonight." The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. James blinked. "What do you—" The room changed. It wasn't a gradual hush. It was a sudden intake of breath, hundreds of people inhaling at once, the sound pulling the air out of the music. Conversation died mid-syllable. Flutes paused halfway to lips. Even the orchestra seemed to soften, as if the violinist's bow had hesitated. James felt the silence before he understood it. He turned. At the top of the grand staircase, a couple stood under the chandelier light, as if the building had been designed for their entrance. Alexander Roth wore a tuxedo cut with razor precision, the kind of tailoring that didn't shout but made everyone else feel underdressed anyway. Silver hair caught the light like a blade's edge. His face was calm, unreadable, and the room recognized him with a reverence that bordered on fear. But the eyes weren't on him. On his arm was Vesper, black velvet, off the shoulder, structured like armor disguised as elegance. The gown absorbed the light and gave it back only where it chose along her collarbones, the curve of her waist, the smooth line of her throat. A necklace of diamonds and emeralds sat heavy against her skin, bright enough to hurt. Her hair fell in sleek vintage waves, and her lipstick was a deep red that looked like a decision. She didn't look like a woman who had been discarded. She looked like a verdict arriving late, still binding. A ripple moved through the crowd. A whisper snapped near James's ear. "My God." Lydia stopped chewing. Her gum click froze in her mouth. "Is that the knitting lady?" she breathed, eyes wide. James didn't answer. He couldn't. His throat tightened, as if the air had thickened into something he had to swallow. Roth and Vesper began to descend. They moved in sync, each step measured, calm, unhurried. The crowd parted without being asked, bodies shifting aside like instinct had replaced etiquette, phone screens lifted discreetly, their glow catching on diamond edges. The chandelier light turned Vesper's emeralds into small green fires. James watched Henri step away from him, actually step away, physically retreating from James's space, and walk toward Roth with a respect James had never been able to buy outright. "Monsieur Roth," Henri said, and his voice changed. Warm, real. "It has been too long." Roth's mouth curved slightly. Not a smile, a permission. Henri bowed over Vesper's hand, like the gesture had been waiting years to exist. "Madame," Henri said, "you look—" Vesper's lips lifted the smallest amount. "Thank you, Henri." Her French was flawless. James felt something hot spark behind his ribs, anger, disbelief, a sharp edge of humiliation. He stepped forward before he could stop himself, dragging Lydia with him by the wrist. "Vesper," he said, voice too loud in the hush. She turned slowly. Her green eyes landed on him without warmth, without nostalgia, like he was a stranger who had mistaken her for someone else. "Hello, James," she said, tone level as marble. James forced a laugh that came out thin. "What is this? You think you can just show up here? This is a business event, not a costume party?" Lydia snickered, finding her courage in James's hostility. "Yeah, nice necklace. Is it rented?" Vesper didn't look at Lydia. Not even a glance. Lydia might as well have been a champagne tray. "I was invited," Vesper said, and her voice carried cleanly. "Alexander is a patron." She lifted a hand to the emeralds with a light touch, the way someone might check a watch. "And this," she added, "was a gift from a man who knows the difference between value and price." A few people nearby covered smiles behind their glasses. A restrained chuckle moved through the air like a private joke. James's face flushed. "You're parading around with him to make me jealous. It's pathetic." Roth stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his expression. The temperature in the space simply seemed to drop, as if the air itself had decided to take him seriously. "Mr. Preston," Roth said, calm and quiet, "lower your tone. You are speaking to a lady." James's jaw flexed. He shifted his weight, trying to reclaim height. "I'm speaking to my ex-wife, and I'm speaking to a man hiding behind a woman to get back in the game." Roth's eyes stayed on James, flat, dangerous. "I'm not here to do business," he said. James scoffed. "Then why are you here?" Roth's mouth curved into something sharper than a smile. "To watch you lose yours." James opened his mouth to snap back, and Vesper's gaze held him like a hand on his throat, calm enough to promise that the next words would matter. The orchestra's strings trembled back to life softly, uncertain. James felt the crowd leaning in. Vesper took one slow step closer, close enough for him to catch her perfume, dark, complex, unfamiliar. Not the floral softness he remembered. This scent had edges. "Enjoy the party, James," she said, voice low and controlled. His stomach tightened, dread pooling where pride used to sit. In the bright, breathless quiet of the Louvre, James realized the room was no longer his stage. And he still didn't know what the script said. Henri's attention had already left James. It wasn't subtle. It was surgical. His body angled away as if James had become an inconvenient noise, and his hand stayed clasped around Roth's, with the ease of old alliances. "You honor us," Henri said to Roth, voice warmed by genuine respect. "Paris has missed you." Roth's reply was quiet, almost lazy. "Paris forgets quickly. That's why people like you exist." A few bankers around them smiled too fast, eager to be seen smiling at the right moment. Champagne flutes hovered at lips and didn't quite touch. Phones stayed low, but screens glowed faintly in palms, recording without admitting it. James stood there with Lydia tugging at his sleeve, his face held in a stiff grin that no longer fit. "You're enjoying this," he snapped, eyes pinned on Vesper. Vesper didn't blink. The chandelier light caught the emeralds at her throat and threw green sparks across her collarbone. She looked more still than the marble columns around them. "This isn't about enjoyment," she said. "It's about timing," James scoffed, but the sound came out thinner than he meant. "Timing for what? A stunt? A photo op?" Lydia leaned in, trying to perform confidence. "You know, if you wanted attention, you could have just made a TikTok." The words hung in the air like cheap perfume. Vesper's gaze remained on James, not even giving Lydia the dignity of acknowledgement. That absence of attention hit harder than an insult. Lydia's smile twitched. James took another step forward, invading space as if he still owned it. The crowd leaned in, a circle formed naturally. The way people step back from a spill they don't want to clean, but can't stop watching. "You signed," James said, voice lowering. "You don't get to play power games anymore." Roth's expression didn't change, but the quiet around him sharpened. He didn't threaten. He didn't posture. He simply existed with the kind of calm that made everyone else aware of their own heartbeats. "Mr. Preston," Roth said, "you're confusing paperwork with reality." James snapped his head toward him. "Oh, please. You think you can walk back into the world and scare everyone with a myth? You vanished. You're a ghost." Roth's mouth curved, barely into something predatory. "A ghost doesn't need to knock," he said. A restrained laugh slipped from someone behind a flute. Another person coughed to disguise their amusement. James felt it as heat under his skin. He hated the sound of other people enjoying his discomfort. Henri's eyes narrowed at James the way a banker looks at a bad risk. "Monsieur Preston," he murmured, "perhaps lower your voice." James looked at Henri as if he'd been slapped. "Henri, don't pretend you're impressed by this. It's theater." Henri didn't answer. His silence was an answer. Vesper shifted, just enough to let the velvet move like water along her hip. The fabric absorbed flash and gave back shape. She lifted her champagne flute not to drink, just to hold it, the stem steady between her fingers. "James," she said, "check the agenda for tomorrow." James barked a laugh. "I set the agenda." "Not anymore," Vesper said. The phrase landed with the soft certainty of a gavel. James's jaw tightened so hard it made the muscles in his cheek jump. He leaned in, close enough that his breath could reach her. "You're bluffing." Vesper's perfume drifted between them, dark, expensive, unfamiliar. It didn't try to please. It existed. "Section 4, she said evenly. "Clause B." James paused. His eyes flickered with irritation, then confusion, then a fast, ugly calculation. He had always believed bylaws were weapons meant for other people. "Hasn't been used," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "It doesn't need to be used often," Vesper said. "It just needs to be there." Roth turned slightly, and the movement drew attention. It wasn't dramatic, but it pulled eyes like gravity. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket with unhurried precision and produced a slim, black leather card case. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. The mere fact of it seemed to signal that paper existed for every claim in this room. James's gaze snapped to the case, then to Vesper's necklace, then back to Roth's face. His pride tried to hold the line, but his instincts were already retreating. "You think buying her jewelry makes her a player?" James said, voice rising with desperation, masked as contempt. "She's still a lady," Roth cut in, same calm tone. "You keep trying to speak over." James's nostrils flared. His eyes darted around the circle of onlookers, searching for a sympathetic face. He found none. Even Lydia was quiet now, her gum forgotten, her attention locked on Vesper's diamonds, with the greedy confusion of someone realizing the room speaks a different language. Vesper lifted her chin slightly, a movement so small it felt like an invitation to focus. "You're right about one thing," she said. James seized the word like a handle. "Exactly." Vesper's lips parted into something that wasn't a smile. "I signed myself out." James blinked, thrown off by the phrasing. His mind wanted a fight with rules he understood. This wasn't that. Henri cleared his throat softly, drawing the room's attention without raising his voice. "Monsieur Roth," he said, "you will be attending the board session tomorrow?" Roth's eyes stayed on James, but he answered Henri. "We will." James's heart gave a quick, ugly kick against his ribs. He tried to laugh again and failed. "Board session," he repeated, too loudly. "I'm the chairman. They'll stop you at the door." Vesper's gaze didn't waver. She stepped half a pace closer, not invading, just closing distance enough to make him hear what came next without the crowd. The chandelier light gleamed off the emeralds. For a moment, James saw not jewelry but weight, the kind of weight that drags empires underwater. "Phoenix Ventures," Vesper said softly. James froze. The name hit him in the stomach like a fist. A memory flashed an image from somewhere in his mind's peripheral vision. Red wax, a crest, something rising out of fire. Echo came fast, sharp and final. The Phoenix wax seal matches the holding company name on the morning filing Phoenix Ventures. James's eyes flicked to Roth's jacket pocket, as if he could see that seal through fabric and wealth and arrogance. "Who?" James started, then stopped. His mouth went dry. "Who owns that?" Vesper leaned in just enough for him to catch the edge of her breath. "I do," she said. The words were almost soundless. They didn't need volume. James heard them like a bell inside his skull. He pulled back a fraction, face tightening as his brain rejected the idea on pure instinct. "You have," he swallowed. "You have nothing." "I have time," Vesper said. Roth watched James with the mild interest of someone observing a predictable collapse. His gaze flicked once to Henri, then to Sarah Jenkins across the room, who stood at the edge of the circle with an unreadable expression and a stillness that suggested she had been listening to the right parts. James noticed her too late. He felt the floor tilt under his confidence. "You're doing this to humiliate me," he hissed. Vesper's eyes stayed calm. "You humiliated yourself." Lydia grabbed James's arm, nails pressing through his sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, suddenly small. "What does that mean?" "Do we still?" "Not now," James snapped, shaking her off without looking. The dismissal made Lydia's face flash with anger, then fear. Her gaze darted around the room, sensing she had stepped into a place where she had no currency. Vesper straightened, reclaiming her space. She placed her flute on a passing waiter's tray without looking. Glass touched silver with a soft, precise clink. Then she moved closer to James again, close enough that the crowd saw it as intimacy, but it was only control. "Enjoy the party," she murmured, voice a blade wrapped in velvet. Drink the champagne. James's eyes widened slightly, betrayed by instinct. Because tomorrow morning, Vesper said, the words measured like a countdown. At 9, I'm taking your chair. She stepped back before he could respond. Roth offered his arm, and she took it without hesitation. They turned toward the ballroom, where the music had restarted in cautious, elegant strokes. The crowd parted again, eager to keep watching from a safe distance. Phones lifted higher now, no longer pretending to be discreet. James stood in the center of the Louvre's polished light, mouth slightly open, as if his body couldn't decide between rage and panic. He forced his shoulders back. He dragged a smile onto his face like armor made of paper. She's bluffing, he muttered, loud enough for Lydia to hear, not loud enough to convince himself. She's weak. She doesn't have the guts. But his fingers were trembling, and in the reflection of a nearby mirrored wall, he caught his own eyes wide, hunted, and suddenly aware that the room had already chosen a new gravity. The Paris night didn't feel romantic from James Preston's suite. It felt sterile. The hotel room was too quiet, padded by thick carpet and heavier curtains. Outside, the city glittered in soft gold, but inside the light was white and unforgiving, reflecting off glass and polished wood like it was trying to expose every crack. A half-finished champagne bottle sweated on the minibar. The air smelled of citrus cleaner and expensive fabric that had never done a day of work. James stood barefoot on the carpet with his tux jacket thrown over a chair like a discarded skin. His tie lay twisted on the desk beside a scatter of papers, printouts, bylaws, loan covenants, an agenda he had opened and closed so many times. The screen on his laptop dimmed in protest. His phone vibrated again. He snatched it up before the second buzz could finish, jaw already tight. "Gregson," he snapped. On the other end, Gregson's voice sounded less sharp than usual, less smug, like someone speaking through a door that might not open. "I have 3 teams looking at it, Mr. Preston. Paris Council, New York Council, and our lender side specialist." James paced. The carpet swallowed his steps, but it didn't swallow the anger. He felt it in the heat behind his eyes, in the ache of his clenched hand. "Tell me you found something," he said. A pause. Papers shifting. A quiet throat clear that tried to buy time. "The debt purchase itself appears clean," Gregson said carefully. "If Phoenix Ventures acquired your notes from the bank, they step into the bank's shoes." James stopped pacing. "They can't do this," he said, voice low and dangerous. "She signed away rights." Gregson exhaled. The sound carried resignation. "She signed away marital claims, James. That waiver doesn't restrict third-party market transactions. If a separate entity bought your debt, that's not her taking your assets. That's commerce." James stared at the far wall. The wallpaper pattern looked suddenly like a trap, gold vines twisting into themselves without ever finding an exit. "Fine," he said. "Then we block them at the meeting. Security. Access. The building." Gregson's pause was longer this time, and it made James's stomach tighten. "They can request entry as a creditor if they have proper documentation," Gregson said. "The board answers to me." James cut in. There was a soft click on Gregson's side, like a pen tapping a desk. "Not if the bylaws allow an emergency motion," Gregson replied. "You asked me to review Clause B. It's not decorative." James's fingers flexed around the phone until his knuckles whitened. "Clause B," he repeated. He could still hear her voice in the Louvre, calm, precise, dropping it like a code word. He could still see the emeralds catching chandelier light like green sparks. James forced his breath to slow. "What about an injunction?" he said. "Freeze it. Delay the vote." "We can attempt it," Gregson said. But timing is brutal. Even if we file before dawn, you're in France. Jurisdiction is messy. And if Phoenix's paperwork is complete, it will be complete, James said. Venom and certainty colliding. That's what Roth does. He ended the call before Gregson could finish, the screen going dark in his hand, like it was ashamed to be associated with him. Across the room, Lydia sat on the bed in a silk robe that didn't quite belong to her. Her dress from the gala was draped across a chair like an abandoned costume. She watched James with wide eyes, chewing the inside of her cheek as if trying to look thoughtful. "So, are we still going shopping tomorrow?" she asked. "Like Chanel?" Or, James whipped his head toward her. "Do you hear yourself, Lydia?" She flinched, then recovered with a pout that used to work on people who weren't bleeding internally. "I'm just asking. You said Paris would be fun." James laughed once, harsh and humorless. "Fun," he repeated. "Right." He turned away before the sight of her could sharpen into something else, regret, maybe, or disgust. He didn't want to name it. His laptop chimed softly as an email arrived. He crossed the room in 3 strides and yanked it open. Subject line: bold, cold, unmistakable. Motion for vote of no confidence filed. His eyes scanned the attached PDF like a man reading his own autopsy. Filed at 6 in the morning, Paris time. An agenda addendum. A request for emergency restructuring. The language was clean, legal, professional. The kind of writing that didn't gloat because it didn't need to. James felt his pulse hammer at his throat. He clicked another attachment. Loan covenant summary. Default events. 2. Missed quarterly payments. Rights of creditor. Assume operational control to protect asset. His mouth went dry. He licked his lips and tasted nothing. A new vibration. Another call. Board chair. James answered instantly, forcing his voice into something smooth. "David," he said. "Let's not overreact." The chair cut in, voice tight. "James, where are you right now?" "In Paris. For the deal. Like we planned." Silence. Then a slow exhale that sounded like disappointment. "The deal is not what we're talking about anymore," David said. "We're talking about Phoenix Ventures. We're talking about a default. We're talking about you using company-backed leverage for personal spending." James's stomach clenched. "That's a misinterpretation," he said quickly. "It was temporary. A bridge." "Save it for the room," David said. 8:55. "Be seated. Be presentable. And for God's sake, don't raise your voice." The line went dead. James stared at the phone as if it had betrayed him. His reflection wavered in the black screen, eyes bloodshot, hair slightly undone, the face of a man trying to hold a collapsing wall up with his hands. He turned back to the desk and grabbed the bylaws printout. Pages crinkled under his grip. He found Section 4, Clause B, and read it again. Slowly, like rereading could change the meaning. It didn't. He threw the pages down. Paper slapped wood with a dull, ugly sound. Lydia sat up straighter, sensing the room's temperature shifting. "Baby," she said softly, trying a different voice. "It's going to be fine. You always—" "Shut up," James said. The words came out flatter than he expected. Not rage. Worse. Lydia's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes flashed with offended disbelief, then dulled into something cautious. She slid off the bed quietly and padded toward the bathroom, shutting the door with a careful click, as if loudness might get her punished. James didn't watch her go. He walked to the window. Paris stretched below him in elegant lines and warm lights, a city that did not care about his panic. The Seine shimmered like a blade laid flat. Somewhere in this beauty, he could feel a trap closing. He pressed his forehead to the glass. His breath fogged it for a moment, then faded. He straightened, rolling his shoulders back, forcing his spine into the posture of authority. He was still chairman. He was still the man people followed. He repeated it like a prayer. The clock on the bedside table glowed. 2 in the morning, then 3, then 4, with the sky outside turning from black to bruised blue. By the time the suite's curtains started to pale with dawn, James hadn't slept. His mind kept circling the same thought, over and over, like a dog returning to a wound. Phoenix Ventures, Clause B, Nineham, at 8:55 the next day. The elevator doors in La Défense would open, and he would find out if power could still be commanded, or if it had already been bought. The conference room in La Défense looked like a glass cage suspended above Paris. Gray morning pressed against the windows, flattening the skyline into steel and fog. The table was too long, too polished. A strip of dark wood that reflected faces like warped mirrors. Air conditioning breathed a steady, artificial chill. Somewhere in the ceiling, a vent clicked softly, like a metronome counting down. James Preston sat at the head of the table at 8:55. He had arrived early on purpose. It was a dominance ritual. He wanted the room to find him already seated, already in control, already the chairman. His tuxedo from last night had been replaced by a tailored suit, crisp enough to cut. His tie was perfectly centered. His hands, under the table, were not. His right leg bounced in a tight, betrayed rhythm. He pressed his heel into the carpet to stop it. The movement resumed anyway, like his body had developed its own opinions overnight. Across from him, Sarah Jenkins sat with a folder open and a pen held still between her fingers. She didn't look at James. She looked at the far end of the table where the doors were, the way someone watches weather they can't stop. Henri Delacroix cleaned his glasses with slow, precise strokes, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Elias Thorne sat too upright, jaw clenched, as if bracing for impact. James cleared his throat. The sound bounced off glass and returned thinner. "Gentlemen, Sarah." His voice came out louder than he intended, filling the room like a shout in a church. "Let's not allow last night's performance to distract us." No one smiled. No one laughed. Even the usual yes-man warmth in Elias's face had drained away. James opened his laptop with a sharp click. The screen glowed. He pulled up the European expansion documents, the signature lines waiting like obedient servants. "We are here to sign," James continued, forcing his tone into something confident. "We sign, the stock stabilizes, and we move forward. That's the job." Sarah's gaze finally lifted. Her eyes were flat. "We cannot sign," she said. James felt his jaw tighten. "Why not?" Henri slid his glasses back onto his nose and spoke without looking up. "We have received a motion for a vote of no confidence." The phrase landed like a chair pulled out from under him. James stared. "By who?" Silence answered for a beat. The air conditioning hummed. A distant elevator bell sounded somewhere outside the room. One clean ding, then faded. James pushed back his chair and stood. "I am the majority shareholder. I own 40%. You don't ambush a chairman with—" A voice came from behind the doors, calm as a blade laid flat. "You own 40% of a company in default." The double doors swung open. James turned so fast, his shoulder brushed the back of his chair. The movement made his suit jacket pull tight across his spine. He felt the room's attention snap to the doorway like a magnet. Vesper Caldwell walked in. She wore a tailored white suit that looked surgical in the gray light. Clean lines, sharp shoulders, no softness to apologize for. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail that made her face look harder, not older. She carried nothing in her hands, no purse, no papers, just the quiet certainty of someone who didn't need props to be believed. A step behind her came Alexander Roth. He held a thick leather binder against his chest, the kind that could break a nose if thrown, the kind that could break a man if opened. His expression was neutral. His eyes were not. James felt heat surge into his face, immediate and humiliating. "Get out," James snapped, pointing a finger that trembled despite his grip. "Security. Get them out of here." Two security guards stood near the doors, broad shoulders, dark suits, earpieces. They didn't move. James blinked once, confused by the lack of obedience, then sharpened into rage. "I said get them out," he barked. The guards remained still. One of them glanced briefly at Roth's binder, then back to the floor, as if avoiding eye contact with a higher authority. Vesper didn't flinch at the shouting. She walked to the opposite end of the table and pulled out a chair with a slow, controlled scrape of wood on carpet. The sound felt indecently loud. She sat with deliberate grace, folding her hands on the table as if she were arriving to host. "They don't work for you anymore, James," Vesper said. James's throat tightened. "That's absurd." Vesper turned her head slightly, not fully, just enough to let the words land with clarity. "We paid your security vendors outstanding invoices this morning. 3 months behind. They work for Phoenix Ventures now." James felt something cold crawl up his spine. The room seemed to tilt, not visually, but internally, like his instincts were trying to find a wall. He forced a laugh that came out jagged. "This is illegal. I have counsel." She signed a waiver. Vesper's gaze held him without warmth. "You keep saying waiver like it's a force field." James's mouth opened to retort, but Roth set the binder down on the table with a single, controlled motion. Thump. The sound wasn't loud. It was final. The binder's clasp snapped open with a clean metallic click. The pages inside were tabbed in black and red. James's eyes caught on a label near the edge, printed in sharp block letters. Phoenix Ventures. His stomach tightened so hard it hurt. Roth slid a document forward across the table. Paper whispered over polished wood. At the top of the page, a header sat in aggressive, unmistakable typography. "Default notice." Under it, smaller text, dense and precise. There was a timestamp in the upper right corner. 6 in the morning. Roth didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Preston Dynamics missed 2 consecutive quarterly payments," Roth said, reading like a man reciting weather. "Under the loan covenants, the creditor has rights to assume operational control to protect the asset." James swallowed. He could feel sweat bead under his collar. "I can pay it," James said quickly, words tumbling out before his pride could edit them. "I can liquidate property. I can—" Roth turned a page with a soft, cruel calm. "The Bel Air residence is mortgaged beyond reasonable leverage," he said. "The Mercer Island property was used as collateral in a second mortgage last week." A flicker crossed Sarah's face. Her grip tightened on her pen. Henry's eyes narrowed, and for the first time he looked directly at James, not with boredom, but with something close to disgust. James's voice rose in panic, disguised as outrage. "That's personal. That's irrelevant. It's relevant when you used company-backed leverage for personal spending," Sarah said, her tone colder now. James looked around the table, searching for Elias like a drowning man searches for a railing. Elias stared at his hands. James's breath became shallow. The air felt thinner. His suit suddenly felt like a costume. Vesper finally spoke again, and it was quieter than the room deserved. "I waived marital claims," she said. I didn't waive my right to participate in the market. James stared at her as if she had changed languages. You don't have the money. Vesper's lips curved, not into a smile, but into a controlled expression that suggested she had stopped negotiating with his reality. I don't need your permission to buy your debt, she said. Roth slid another page forward, then another. Each one landed in front of the board members like a chain being laid on the table link by link. A receipt, a transfer confirmation, a clean signature line. On the last page, a seal was visible in the corner, a phoenix pressed into wax, copied into ink, the same symbol James had seen too late and never understood. His mouth went dry. He tasted ash. Now, Vesper said, her voice steady, we can proceed with the motion. James opened his mouth to shout again, to reclaim the room through volume, through threat, through the old muscle memory of intimidation. But the guards didn't move, the board didn't flinch, and the binder sat open like a wound that refused to close. James realized, with a sharp clarity that made his vision tighten at the edges, that control was no longer something he could demand. It had already been documented, stamped, and delivered, and the doors behind Vesper remained wide open, as if the room itself had decided who belonged inside. The room didn't erupt, it tightened. Silence pressed down on the table as if the glass walls were pulling it in from the gray Paris sky. The binder stayed open in front of Roth like a mouth that had already spoken the ending. Tabs in black and red lined the edge. Documents lay flat, stamped, time-marked, unimpressed by emotion. James stood at the head of the table with his hands braced against the wood, trying to force solidity into his posture. His eyes kept flicking from face to face, hunting for loyalty, the way a man hunts for a weapon he dropped. This is extortion, he said, voice sharp. You can't just walk in here and you're confusing pressure with process, Sarah Jenkins replied, not raising her tone. Her pen clicked once, then went still. We have emotion. Henri's gaze remained on James. Colder now. And we have cause. James swallowed. He tasted metal. Cause, he repeated, like the word could be argued into a smaller shape. What cause? Roth turned one page with a soft, deliberate slide. Paper whispered across paper. He didn't look at James when he spoke. Financial malfeasance, Roth said. Covenant breach. Misuse of collateral. James's voice jumped. Bridge financing is common. You all know that. Elias Thorne's shoulders shifted like he wanted to shrink into his chair. His eyes stayed down, fixed on his own hands, as if they belonged to someone else. James turned to him, desperate. Elias, tell them. We've done this before. We played golf on Sunday. Elias's throat bobbed. His voice came out small. I have 3 kids in college, James. The sentence landed like betrayal because it was honest. James stared at him as if the man had slapped him in public. Vesper sat at the opposite end of the table, hands folded, posture clean. She didn't look triumphant. She looked finished. Her expression was controlled in a way that made James feel childish for still trying to win with volume. We move forward, Sarah said, calm and final. Vote of no confidence. Removal of the chairman. James shook his head hard. This is insanity. I built this company. Vesper finally spoke, and the words were quiet enough that everyone leaned in without realizing they were doing it. You built it leveraged, she said, and then you bet everyone else's future on your appetite. James's face flushed. You don't know what you're talking about. Roth slid another page forward. The top header was bold and ugly in its certainty. Foreclosure rights summary. A timestamp sat in the corner like a bruise that wouldn't fade. James's jaw tightened, but his eyes couldn't stop reading. Henri lifted his hand first. I vote yes, Henri said, voice smooth and cold. Remove the chairman. James's chest tightened. He looked at Sarah, still expecting a hesitation that never came. Sarah raised her hand. Yes. James turned back to Elias like a drowning man reaching for a last railing. Elias hesitated, eyes wet with fear, then lifted his hand. Yes, the remaining board members followed, faster than James could process. Hands rose around the table with the casual decisiveness of people protecting their own oxygen. Unanimous. The word didn't need to be spoken. It hung in the room anyway. James remained standing, frozen in the posture of authority with nothing underneath it. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Sound failed him for a beat. You can't do this, he said finally, voice cracking at the edges. I am Preston Dynamics. Vesper stood. The chair legs made a soft scrape against carpet. It sounded louder than it should have. The movement drew every eye to her like a magnet, finding metal. Not anymore, she said. She walked down the length of the table, slow enough to make James feel every second of it. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere outside, a distant elevator chimed faintly, indifferent. James's breathing sped up. His hands tightened at his sides. He tried to hold his chin high, but fear kept slipping through. Vesper stopped beside him, close enough that he could smell her dark, expensive, unfamiliar. Nothing like the life he'd decided was hers to lose. You want to gloat? James spat, forcing anger into his voice like paint over rot. Go ahead. Vesper didn't react to the provocation. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a single piece of paper, a check, crumpled, rain-stained. The ink slightly blurred at the edges. She placed it on the table in front of him with a gentle tap, as if setting down something fragile. James stared at it. $50,000. His own signature, his own arrogance, preserved. I told you to keep it, Vesper said. James's throat worked. He didn't blink. Vesper's voice stayed even. You're being removed with cause. Your golden parachute is void. James's eyes lifted to hers, suddenly frantic. Vesper. His voice dropped, ugly and pleading. Lydia will leave me if I don't have money. The admission tasted like shame the moment it left his mouth, but he didn't pull it back. Vesper's gaze softened by a fraction, not into pity, into clarity. If she leaves because you're poor, she said, then she never loved you. Her tone didn't accuse. It observed. And if you think money is the only reason anyone stays, she added, then you never understood me. James's face twisted. Rage tried to claw its way back in. You'll crash this company in a week. Maybe, Vesper said. She turned slightly, eyes sweeping the room, board members watching her now with a mixture of fear and expectation, the way people watch a new storm system form. But at least I'll be the one flying it. She looked toward the security guards by the doors. They were still, waiting for direction like machines that had been reassigned. Escort Mr. Preston out, Vesper said. Company phone, access badge, no stops. Yes, ma'am, one guard replied. The words hit James like a slap. Ma'am, not sir. Hands took his arm. Firm, professional, not violent, worse routine. As if this were just another vendor contract being enforced. Don't touch me, James snapped, yanking back. But the guard didn't release him. James's shoes scraped the carpet, a harsh sound in the controlled quiet. He straightened his tie in a last reflex of dignity, eyes burning with humiliation. You'll regret this, he hissed at Vesper. Vesper didn't flinch. You'll survive it. As the guards guided him toward the doors, a small device in one guard's hand beeped. James's access badge was scanned, then disabled. The sound was brief, electronic, indifferent. Beep, a clean cut. The double doors opened. James was escorted out of his own empire like an unwanted delivery. Just before the doors closed, James's eyes caught Roth leaning against the wall in the corridor outside. Roth glanced at his watch, an elegant movement, almost bored, and then met James's gaze. No words. A single, controlled look that said this was always going to happen. The doors shut with a soft, decisive click. In the sudden quiet, Vesper exhaled. Her shoulders dropped by a fraction, as if a weight she'd carried for years had finally been set down without ceremony. Roth stepped closer and placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. The touch was brief, grounding, not possessive. "How does it feel?" he asked, low. Vesper's eyes moved to the empty chair at the head of the table, the chair James had believed was welded to his name. Her voice came out quiet, almost surprised. "Like I can finally breathe." She turned back to the board, expression tightening into focus. "All right," she said, "steady now. First item on the agenda." The pen in Sarah's hand clicked once, and the work began. 6 months later, the air in Tuscany tasted like sun-warmed stone and crushed grapes. A private airfield sat at the edge of rolling vineyards, quiet enough to hear heat shimmer. The runway was a pale strip cut through green, and beyond it the hills softened into a hazy gold. Cicadas stitched a constant thread of sound through the afternoon. The sky was an unbroken blue that looked almost artificial after so many months of glass towers and fluorescent boardrooms. Vesper stood on the tarmac in a white linen dress and flat sandals. The fabric moved lightly against her calves whenever the breeze shifted. Her hair was loose, dark strands lifting and settling against her shoulders like the air was trying to reassure her. She held a pair of sunglasses in one hand, but didn't put them on. She wanted the brightness. In front of her, the Global 7500 waited in the sun. In daylight, it looked less like a predator and more like a monument. Matte metal, flawless lines, an engine casing so smooth it didn't seem real. Ground crew moved around it with practiced quiet, fueling hoses snaking across concrete. The faint smell of jet fuel hung in the air, sharp and clean. Alexander Roth stood near the wing, sleeves rolled up, aviator sunglasses cutting his face into angles. He ran his hand along the fuselage, as if checking for imperfections no one else could see. He didn't look hurried. He didn't look threatened. He looked like a man who had survived storms and learned how to enjoy the calm without trusting it. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice low, almost careful. Vesper didn't answer immediately. Her gaze stayed on the aircraft's open service door, where a clipboard rested against a crew member's hip. Paperwork, signatures, stamps, the same kind of proof that had ended one life and started another. A faint breeze carried the scent of rosemary from somewhere beyond the fence. "Yes," she said at last. "I'm sure." Roth tilted his head slightly. "You don't want to keep it?" Vesper's fingers tightened around her sunglasses, the frames pressed into her palm. A small, solid reminder of control. She looked up at the jet again, and for a moment the memory of rain and floodlights tried to slip into the present. She didn't fight it. She let it pass through her like weather. "It's too big," she said. "It feels like running." Roth's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Running kept you alive." "It did," Vesper said. Her voice stayed steady. "But I don't need it now." The ground crew paused near the nose of the jet, waiting with a pen. A stamped envelope sat on the clipboard, its edges crisp. The paper had weight, the kind that turned decisions into facts. Vesper walked forward, sandals tapping lightly on the tarmac. Each step felt simple, almost ordinary, and that ordinariness made her chest tighten with something close to relief. She took the pen, The ink moved across the page in smooth strokes. No trembling, no bargaining, just the quiet finality of ownership used with intent. She handed the clipboard back. The crew member nodded, professional, almost reverent. A second person affixed a stamp onto the documents with a firm, confident thunk. The sound echoed briefly against the hangar wall. Roth let out a soft laugh, rich and surprised. "You just gave away a $70 million jet." Vesper turned her face toward him, squinting slightly in the light. "Doctors Without Borders needs it more than I do." Roth's laughter deepened, then faded into something warmer. "You're terrible at being a billionaire." "I'm learning," she said, and a small smile slipped through, quick, genuine. She lifted her sunglasses, then lowered them again without putting them on. Her eyes drifted past Roth, toward a smaller hangar, set a short distance away. Its doors were closed, plain and unremarkable, the kind of place people ignored. Vesper pointed with her chin. "I have something else," she said. Roth followed her gaze. "What is that?" Vesper didn't answer. She walked toward the hangar instead, the sun warming her shoulders. The tarmac radiated heat up through her sandals. The cicadas grew louder as she approached, as if the airfield itself was leaning in. A worker at the smaller hangar nodded at her and reached for a control panel. The doors began to roll open with a slow, mechanical hum. Light spilled inside, revealing a compact shape waiting in shadow, a restored Cessna 172. Cherry red paint gleamed under the hangar lights, bright enough to look almost playful. The aircraft was small and honest, with a propeller that looked like it belonged to a different kind of life. No luxury, no intimidation, just a machine meant to be flown, not displayed. Roth stopped beside her, head angled in disbelief. "You're joking." Vesper's smile widened. And this time, she didn't hide it. "I got my pilot's license last week." Roth's sunglasses dipped slightly, as if he needed to see her face better. "You did not." Vesper reached out and ran her hand along the red paint. It was warm from the sun, smooth, real. "Arthur taught me." Roth's eyebrows rose. "Of course he did." She turned toward Roth, and the light caught her eyes, making the green look almost unreal against the Tuscan gold. "I want to fly myself," she said. "No staff, no pilot, no escape plan." Roth took off his sunglasses. Without them, his eyes looked darker, more exposed. He studied her with the same careful attention he used for hostile rooms and fragile deals. "I've faced hostile takeovers," he said slowly. "Federal investigations, market crashes." He paused, then let the corner of his mouth lift. "Getting in a plane with a rookie pilot might be my biggest risk." Vesper's gaze stayed on him. The air between them felt clean, stripped of performances. "I have room for one," she said quietly. "If he's brave enough." Roth stepped closer, close enough that Vesper could see a faint line near his brow, the scar that never quite disappeared. He reached for her hand. His grip was warm and steady, an anchor rather than a claim. "That is a yes," he said. Vesper led him to the Cessna. She climbed into the cockpit with practiced ease, settling into the seat as if it had been waiting for her. The cabin smelled like leather, metal, and sun-baked plastic. A simple, honest smell. She put on the headset. The padding pressed gently against her ears, quieting the world to a soft hush. Her fingers moved over the gauges, fuel full, oil pressure green, everything where it should be. Roth climbed into the passenger seat, watching her hands more than her face. He didn't advise. He simply trusted. Vesper turned the key. The propeller jerked, then roared to life. A rough, thrilling sound that vibrated through the seat and into her bones. The noise wasn't elegant. It was alive. She guided the plane toward the runway. The wheels rolled over the tarmac with a soft rattle, and the vineyard air slid past the windows in warm waves. At the threshold, she paused. The runway stretched forward, bright and empty, pointing into open sky. Roth's hand found hers again for a brief moment. A quiet squeeze. Vesper pushed the throttle forward. The plane surged ahead, faster and faster, the ground blurring beneath them. The world narrowed to speed, sound, and a clean line of possibility. Then, the wheels lifted. For a second, weight disappeared. The vineyards dropped away, becoming a patchwork quilt of green and gold. The air smoothed out. The horizon opened wide, indifferent to old fears. Vesper kept her eyes forward, steady hands on the controls, a calm focus settling over her like sunlight. She no longer asked for permission to live.